And along with that, we're seeing changes in a number of other geophysical systems. One of the obvious ones is the Arctic sea ice, and the red line here shows you the observations. You can see that that's actually it's melting more quickly than the mean and range of IPCC models, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. And that suggests perhaps that climate change is perhaps going more quickly than was predicted even a few years ago. And you can see the bottom part of this slide, the change in the Arctic sea ice from 1979 over here to 2007. So it's quite clearly a visible change. One of the things that concerns climatologists is that climate change may not just be a linear process. There may be non-linear tipping points in the Earth's system. And there may be a number of these, which are summarized on this slide. These include instability of the Greenland ice sheet. If that starts to melt and we lose a lot of that ice sheet, then that could accelerate the raising sea level. A weakening of the North Atlantic current, the North Atlantic oscillation, which currently keeps Europe relatively warmer than you would predict on the basis of its latitude. And if that starts to weaken as ice melts and so on, that could change the whole climate system in the North Atlantic and actually paradoxically lead to colder winters even as the Earth itself warms. We could see collapses of the Amazonian forest due to substantial climate change. So although deforestation is a contributor to climate change itself may drive deforestation, may drive dieback of certain trees. Instability of the West Antarctic ice sheet and transformation of the monsoon. Now, climatologists don't know exactly how likely these very dramatic events are to occur. It is thought at the moment that they are unlikely, perhaps less than 1%, something of that order. But obviously the further we go out of the bounds of human experience in terms of future climate, then the more likely these extreme events are to happen. It's not just temperature, of course, it's also the fact that climate change causes wide-ranging changes in precipitation, in other words, rainfall. And although it's difficult to predict the geographical nature of these changes in precipitation, this slide just shows you where there's a relative consensus of a range of different climate models. And you can see, for example, that many of them predict drying around the Mediterranean, North Africa, so Southern Africa, Southern Australia, southern parts of the US, and parts of Latin America. That's the red and orange, yellow colouring. And then they also predict increased rainfall in other parts of the world, parts of East Africa, parts of South Asia, parts of the Northern Europe and Northern North America. So there seems to be a relative convergence of a number of these climate models, which may indicate that there is a fairly consistent pattern which will occur, but we still don't know until obviously we experience it. What does that mean in the case of Australia? This is a slide taken from Neil Stephan, who is the director of the Climate Change Institute of the Australian National University, who presented this at our recent conference, the FENA conference. And his view was that here in the southwest part of Australia, there's strong evidence of a climate change signal. These changes do seem to be more than can be explained by natural variation alone. There may also be some possible change here around Melbourne and Victoria. Up here, it's less clear. There's a lot of variation in the climate system in this part of in Queensland and this part of Australia, and so it's not clear yet whether there is a climate change signal or not. Only time will tell. So what kind of impacts can these changes have? Well, one that I've already mentioned, of course, is as you get melting of the ice sheets and as the oceans warm, of course, as you warm water, it expands. So we expect there to be sea level rise, perhaps a metre over the next century, perhaps a lot more if the ice caps start melting in an accelerated fashion. And this slide just shows you parts of the world, that, particularly the densely populated parts of the world, that are projected to be flooded every year due to sea level rise by the latter part of this century. And you can see that some of them are very large cities indeed. The Ganges and the Brahmaputra, millions of people there. The Nile Delta, again, millions of people. The Mekong Delta, the Mississippi, and so on. And so many major cities around the world built on deltas could be threatened by climate change. Of course, they may be able to adapt, they may be able to put up flood defences, but that will be expensive, in some cases difficult.